In his limited free time, Atticus worked with Daphne on potty training. Being the determined child she was, she caught on very quickly, and it only took a few weeks until she got the hang of it on her own. Atticus was very proud of her and was grateful that it came easy to her. He was anticipating his potential meeting with Tommy and didn't have the mental capacity or patience for anything else. Sarah felt so blessed and happy to be with child again after the tragic loss of Charlene. She felt like her life was over. Now that her life was moving forward again and she had purpose, she found herself enjoying the little things. She cherished every single day as she was pregnant and that the baby in her belly was healthy. Although her body ached and she was growing larger each day, she didn't take it for granted or complain. This was a miracle that she never thought she would experience again. She loved these private moments between her and the baby kicking in her belly. Sarah tried to integrate her husband into the pregnancy this time round. He suffered in silence after Charlene was born sleeping, and she wanted him to know he was appreciated and loved. Atticus enjoyed every opportunity to feel their baby move. This baby was either the most active child, or there was more than one baby in there. Atticus hoped they would have multiples. He and Sarah were great parents together. Sarah was grateful for the love and words of encouragement that Atticus gave her. With Atticus by her side, she could do anything. Daphne became an active participant in tending to the chickens. She went out every morning with her daddy and liked to pet the animals. Sometimes, Daphne was a little too eager to engage with the chickens and one of them would peck or squawk at her. No matter how many times it happened, each occurrence frightened her. Being the independent girl she was, she quietly walked away from the chickens and cried. She only cried for a moment before turning back to her happy and carefree self. The chickens became a family affair, as much as Atticus loved his family. He wished he could have time to himself again so he was able to prepare for his potential meeting with Tommy. That was only a week away. Something that brought Sarah great shame was shutting her daughter out of her heart for an entire year. They had slowly built their bond back to how it was before, but her daughter did not deserve that treatment. It filled her heart with so much love that Daphne did not hold that against her. The tot still smiled and laughed with her, gave her mommy hugs, and told her she loved her. Sarah would be making up for that year forever. Tommy was already waiting for Atticus when he approached the snail statue. He begged for Tommy's forgiveness and told him that he never stopped loving him. Tommy mirrored the sentiment. Atticus flung himself into his lover's arms and sobbed. He had missed everything about Tommy. He smelled familiar, like how he always smelled, but now Tommy was a man with a beard and broad shoulders. He looked more beautiful than ever before. Atticus crashed his lips on Tommy's before his mind could protest. To his surprise, Tommy pulled him back into another kiss. They stood there for a long time, their lips becoming reacquainted. Atticus's whole body relaxed now that he was in the arms of his one true love once again. His life finally made sense again. The newly reunited lovebirds laid a blanket on the damp ground and caught each other up on their lives. Tommy had been forced to marry, like Atticus. He too thought about Atticus every single day. As much as Atticus wanted to know every detail about Tommy since their departure, Atticus felt an overwhelming desire to be close with Tommy. He had waited for this moment for many years. This kiss had been what he imagined every time he and Sarah completed the marital act. Tommy's body and touch had been the only object of his desire. They rediscovered each other until the early hours of the morning. Both men cried happy tears. Atticus returned home shortly before the sun came up. He felt almost euphoric from his night with Tom, the gravity of the situation not yet hitting him. He washed all traces of Tommy off of his body before his wife woke up. However, The memory of this night would never leave his mind. Tommy still loved him, and that was all that mattered. They would figure the rest out together. Sarah was diagnosed with preeclampsia in her 3rd trimester. This news sent she and Atticus into a panic, but the doctor reassured them that as long as she had the baby in the hospital, mother and baby would likely be fine. Atticus did his best to comfort his wife, although there wasn't anything he could say to calm her worries. He tried his best to be present for Sarah even though his mind was on his rekindling with Tommy. He felt immensely guilty because he deceived Sarah and broke his vows. He could never love Sarah in the passionate and longing way that he did Tommy. So instead of being honest about himself and the fact that he was gay, he was there for Sarah during every step of her pregnancy. She needed him, so he was there. It was the least he could do for such an angel of a woman. Atticus tried his best to still be a good father to little Daphne. He loved her so much. As much as he tried to be present and listen to her silly stories, he found his thoughts returning to Tommy. How would this mundane but wonderful life be enough when the love of his life was so close? To help him process through his predicament, Atticus told Daphne the story of the frog and the toad. It was his and Tommy's love story, but through a fairy tale lens. Daphne thought the frog and toad should be together. Atticus agreed. Sarah tried to remain hopeful and fearless, but she found herself contemplating her morality next to the fire often. Would Atticus and Daphne be okay if she didn't survive this pregnancy? Atticus did his best to distract his wife of these thoughts. Every fiber of his being missed Tommy, but he owed it to Sarah to help her through this difficult time. She was his best friend and he had an obligation as her husband. Sarah appreciated Atticus's extra effort. She thought that this meant that Atticus would finally fully open himself up to her and they could have the marriage she read about in books. She loved him desperately despite his standoffish nature. A few weeks later, Sarah went into labor, so they packed up to have their baby at the hospital under the watchful eye of doctors. Sarah was terrified that this was her last day on earth and needed her husband's comfort. Atticus promised his wife that she had so much more life to live and they would be leaving the hospital with another blessing for their family. He reassured her that he would be there holding her hand through it all. They spent many hours in the hospital waiting for Sarah to be dilated enough to push. Atticus held her in his arms as they swayed together. Atticus whispered words of encouragement in her ear. Sarah thought of their wedding day and their first dance as husband and wife. They had come so far and she had fallen more in love with him. She felt lucky to have a husband that cared for her as deeply as Atticus did. After 22 hours of labor, Sarah felt ready to push. Her doctors were on standby in case anything went awry with she or the baby. The pain was immense, but she didn't feel as scared like she was with Charlene. She felt hopeful. Atticus spoke words of praise and reassurance as she pushed. She knew he was as nervous as she was, but she appreciated him being constant comfort during this time. She cursed and cried. She was a roller coaster of emotions. She prayed and prayed that this child would not be born sleeping, that she and Atticus would be blessed with another baby to love and cherish. Her body relaxed and her heart swelled when she heard a tiny little cry. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named their son Edward, after Sarah's late father. Atticus let his wife pick the name because he would have replied that Thomas was a good name. Both Sarah and Atticus were shocked when the doctor informed them that another baby was crowning. Sarah gave birth to a second healthy baby boy. They decided to name this child Robert. Sarah named this son after her late grandfather. Sarah stared in awe and disbelief at the two little boys staring up at her. She felt so blessed that her body had not failed her again, and produced not one, but two healthy and beautiful children. Their family felt complete. Atticus watched his wife kiss their newborn children with pride and admiration. He was a father of 3 now and married to the strongest woman he knew. Why did his heart still feel a void? Why was Tommy his first thought? The twins were both great babies, ate well, and slept through the night. Edward woke often during the day to give his mother smiles while Robert slept most of the time. They were perfect in their parents' eyes. Daphne was having a difficult time adjusting to no longer being the only child. She lashed out by making more messes and demanding more attention. To help his daughter with this adjustment, Atticus woke her up every morning to go with him to tend to the chickens. He gave her little tasks to make her feel important and needed. Daphne enjoyed this alone time with her daddy. Sarah had missed the newborn stage of parenting so much. Her boys were so little and cuddly. Daphne had been a breeze as a newborn. Having to was much more difficult. She also insisted on doing most things herself. There was a time when she didn't think she would ever have a newborn again, and so she was selfish with her time with the twins. Sarah felt very protective of her boys. She had already lost 1 child, and she couldn't bear losing another. This caused many sleepless nights. She would knit in the rocking chair and watch the twins sleeping and breathing. She was exhausted. Once Daphne wasn't as destructive and angry about the new additions, Atticus brought her in to officially meet her brothers. It was also an added bonus to see her mummy, which she seldom had since the twins had been born. Daphne was curious about her brothers. She told them silly stories, but her mother got upset with her because her loud voice woke both of the twins up, so she was asked to leave the room. When Sarah physically could not stay awake any longer, Atticus insisted on taking over with the twins. He was nervous, and he would not grow a bond with them because Sarah was always with them. He did what he could to help his wife, but the twins preferred their mother holding them. Atticus was unsure if he would ever have a bond with the twins the way he instantly bonded with Daphne. Daphne acted out more when Atticus spent time with the twins. She didn't care if her mummy spent time with the babies, but her daddy was her playmate and best friend. She didn't want to share him. She didn't want to be left behind or forgotten about now that her parents had 2 new children to love. She felt very alone during this period. Sarah was appreciative of her husband letting her sleep, but she much preferred being awake and spending time with her beaux. She didn't want to miss even a moment of their lives. Atticus did chores around the house to make his wife's life easier. The downtime caused him to think more about Tommy. He missed him. Atticus desperately tried to subside his many thoughts of Tommy by fixing appliances or the plumbing around the house. It would be unfair of him to leave for a few days and have Sarah be with the children by herself, so he could see Tommy again. When Atticus couldn't take the longing any longer, he wrote Tommy a letter. He told him to meet at their spot in a month. They would tell their wives they were going on a fishing trip. This was their chance to reconnect on a much deeper level. He felt selfish for the timing of this rendezvous. More importantly, he felt immense guilt about the deception. Sarah deserved better. To pass the time quicker before his fishing trip, Atticus tended to Sarah's neglected garden. This was Atticus's way of apologizing for lying to her and breaking his vows. She was none the wiser. Of course, Daphne insisted on helping her daddy with the garden. She hated to be locked up inside with her crying brothers, so she became her daddy's shadow. Atticus did not mind in the slightest. She was there more for moral support than to actually help, but Atticus enjoyed her company. She whispered words of encouragement for the plants to grow big and strong, so it would put a smile on her mom's face. Atticus wanted to make sure that everything was in working order and clean when he left for his trip with Tommy. It was the least he could do for leaving Sarah alone with 3 kids. Their time was still such a special bonding time for Atticus and Daphne. She loved the many silly voices that he would narrate the stories with. She felt comforted to fall asleep with her daddy next to her, keeping her safe. Atticus and Sarah now slept on opposite sides of the bed. Sarah did so because she didn't want to wake her husband when the twins awoke in the middle of the night. Atticus did so because his heart belonged to another, and he felt guilty. Atticus decided that he would actually go fishing as he waited for his love to arrive. He wanted to bring back fish for the family to not raise suspicion of his real reason for his trip. Atticus was so focused on fishing that he barely noticed Tommy join him on the other side of the pond. His heart beat out of his chest with desire at the sight of him. Atticus told Tommy how much he missed him and how he consumed every thought since their last meeting. Tommy's thoughts mirrored his own. Clothes were thrown off in a frenzy. It had been 6 months since their last encounter, and both were filled with desire and longing for the other. The marital act with their wives was one of duty. This experience was the only time they felt passion. Atticus didn't think these fleeting moments, once or twice a year, would ever be enough for him. But they were trapped. They had responsibilities and obligations to their families. They made the most of their time together. Every touch felt electric. This was the only time Atticus felt truly alive. They made love many times during their 3 days together. On the last day of their visit, the two men went for a dip in the river where they first met all of those years ago. Saying goodbye to each other always felt as heartbreaking as the first time. The secret couple kissed passionately as they recounted how they met. Tommy stated that it was the best day of his entire life. Atticus didn't want to leave him again. He wanted to stay in their happy place forever. Atticus returned home during midday. Sarah was in the twins' room as per usual. He wanted a full report of what he missed while on his trip. Sarah missed her husband very much when he was gone. Atticus hugged her tightly and kissed her on the cheek. She asked about his trip, and Atticus purposefully was as vague as possible. Daphne spent the majority of her time playing by herself, and her daddy was on his fishing trip. She had asked to come with him, and he said no. Her mummy rarely paid attention to her. Her priorities were her brothers, and the lack of attention or affection from her mother made her sad. She saw her at mealtimes. Atticus greeted his firstborn with the biggest hug when he returned. She seemed upset, so he wanted to put a smile on her face. He felt guilty for leaving her for 3 days to be with Tommy. Atticus cleaned up all of Daphne's messes without a word. It was not her fault that her father abandoned her for 3 days to be with his lover. Her path of destruction was Atticus's doing, and he felt like a terrible father. A few weeks after Atticus's trip, twins aged up into infants. Sarah was incredibly emotional during this time and wanted them to stay this small forever. Atticus was hopeful that Sarah would pay more attention to Daphne and get more sleep as the twins got bigger. What she was currently doing was not healthy nor sustainable. Edward's infant trait is sunny. Robert's infant trait is wiggly. Atticus's wish for Sarah to ask him for more help came true. As the boys grew bigger, taking care of them was a two-person job, especially when it came to tummy time. Sarah worked with one twin while Atticus worked with the other. They had always been incredible parents together. They worked together seamlessly, like a well-oiled machine. Atticus loved his sons dearly and was appreciative that his wife was sharing them with him more often. He tried to divide his time between them and Daphne, but spent the majority of time with his eldest. She needed the attention more. The twins' bedtime was earlier than Daphne's, so Atticus was able to help his wife with their nighttime routine. Atticus and Sarah did not even need to speak. They could anticipate the other's next move by a simple glance. Atticus had struggled with regret shortly after marrying Sarah, but he no longer felt that way. He and Tommy were meant to get married and have their children. Atticus couldn't imagine a life where Daphne Robert, and Edward didn't exist. And despite condemning Sarah to a loveless marriage, he was grateful for her. She was the kindest woman with such a big heart. She was his best friend, and he needed her just as much as he needed Tommy. Life was cruel that way. Life returned to normal after Atticus and Tommy's biannual fishing trip. Those trips made him appreciate the family he has made with Sarah, while simultaneously wishing he and Tommy could just run over. Why together? Those thoughts made Atticus feel like a terrible person and father. He wouldn't trade being a father for anything in the world, but he wished he could have both. He didn't want to choose between love or family. His family, especially little Daphne, was such a gift in his life. It brought him joy and a sense of purpose. His bond with Daphne was so strong. Daphne looked up to her daddy so much. Atticus tried his best to shake Tommy from his mind during the months they were apart. He had both in his life right now. Although separate, he had many things to be grateful for. That had to be enough for him. Sarah was none the wiser to anything her husband was doing. She focused on making sure the twins were happy and healthy. She still longed for closeness with her husband, but no longer felt her happiness depended on it. All she cared about was being a good mother to her children and giving them a happy childhood that she was not given. Atticus encouraged Daphne to branch out and eat more foods, but was often unsuccessful. Daphne was becoming quite a stubborn character, much like her father. She ate the same foods every single day. She had established a routine for herself, and with her daddy, she didn't like change, nor did she like when her daddy went somewhere without her. She was comfortable. Atticus and Daphne's routine was rigid but full of laughter and fun. Daphne's favorite part of the day had become bath time. By the end of the day, she was filthy from helping her daddy on their land. She enjoyed splashing in the water and making sure her daddy was soaked by the end of it. She was an ornery little girl and loved to make him laugh. He was her favorite person in the world. In an effort to right the wrong she made by annexing herself and the twins, Sarah encouraged family time. The boys needed to bond with their sister more, and she needed to yet again repair the relationship. With Daphne loved her brothers and her mummy, but she preferred to have her daddy all to herself. She did not like to share him with her family. Eventually, the day that Sarah had been dreading came. She and Atticus would be aging into adults. The thought of growing older upset Sarah because she was afraid her beauty would fade and Atticus would be even less interested. Sarah blew out her candles and wished for a healthier and happy marriage. Her life as a mother was great. She just wanted Atticus to love her the way she loved him. Atticus blew out his candles and wished for a world that he could still have his family, but also be able to love Tommy openly. It was impossible, but he wished for it anyway. The twins had come a long way with their milestones. They were not as quick of learners as Daphne was, but Sarah and Atticus worked diligently with them. Daphne liked to watch her brothers learn how to sit up when she played with her toes. She would soon age into a child, so she knew it was her duty as big sister to be protective of them. They spent more and more time together as a family. Both Atticus and Sarah knew it was a disservice to their children to be separated. They needed to be one big happy family. The happy part was becoming more difficult for Atticus. He loved his family but realized he could never be fully content. He was hiding his true self from them. Sarah made extra effort to spend time with Daphne, just the two of them. Sarah loved her children equally, but found it harder to connect with Daphne because she was so bonded with Atticus. She tried so hard to recreate the bond she had with her firstborn. A strained relationship was her own doing. She had to accept that. Little by little, Daphne warmed to her mother again. She still preferred to be with her daddy, but that didn't mean she had to completely shut her mummy out. The day Atticus had been pretending didn't exist for weeks finally came. His little girl was aging up into a child. He worried that their bond would not be as strong once she started school. He baked her cake and reminisced on when Daphne was so small. Life was about to change for him so much, and he didn't know if he was ready for it. Atticus put the candles on the cake and wished for a future that he and his family would be happy. Daphne clung to her daddy as she blew out her candles. She was excited to grow older. She wished for things to stay the same. She wanted to stay close to her daddy despite having to go to school. Happy birthday to our 1940s heir. Daphne's childhood trait is that she is a Capricorn.